Hello, and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where, damn, we've got some juicy headlines to discuss. And we'll get to Dune, yes, in just a moment. Some really interesting stuff happening there. But I want to start with the opening RT score for Eternals. Wow. Wowie, wow, wow. This is the most hotly anticipated movie for the rest of 2021. Forget just movie theaters counting on this film. It's being watched closely by many studios for what they should do with their own upcoming blockbusters, as box office totals have yet to return to normal. To be frank, I still think Eternals will open pretty big, even though this RT score might keep it from opening at 100 million as many had hoped before we got this RT score. But this does not look good for Eternals' long-term box office prospects. And it was really hoped that it would help in that area as well, because as I just said, they are definitely not back to normal. Having seen the film myself, my review just went up, I'd say it's fair for Eternals to have an RT score in the 70s. But if it drops below that into the 60s, I think that would be a bit low for the movie. I think that would be a bit undeserving. Although I do believe there's blood in the water. People aren't sure which way to go, but I think this has opened the door to giving it a bad review. And I hope that people don't take it, I think some people are always, like, oh, how do you like it, MCU? Have all these other franchises have to deal with this. But I don't think that element should be in there. So as I said, I think something in the 70s is fair, but below that, I would think other factors were at play. To date, the MCU has had a handful of movies in the 70s, believe it or not, but only one in the 60s, and that's Thor: The Dark World. I did see some people say that this was the worst one since Thor: The Dark World. I think that's an unfair comparison. I mean, Thor: The Dark World was actually unwatchable. As I've told you before, when the movie ended, I apologized to the people I asked to go with me. I wouldn't do that for Eternals. Also, that 2 of the 3 Phase 4 movies to date are in the 70s? That's not good. I mean, it goes to show how important the MCU formula is. Shang-Chi followed that formula to a T, and it got the RT score, audience scores, and box office to show for it. That's a phenomenal film. Yes, it's important to change things up and keep things fresh in the MCU, but I think that the core structure of the MCU formula, the bones of these movies, needs to stay the same. And I think that it's, the key is mixing the MCU with other genres. And I don't think that Chloe Zhao mixed here. I think there's very little, if any, MCU DNA in this movie whatsoever. Now let's put a pin in Eternals, as it's still 2 weeks away from opening. So why did all the reviews come out today? Well, that's because Disney wanted it to close out the Rome Film Festival, which it did today. So that's when the review embargo lifted. And they did that because they wanted to help it with its awards campaign. Although this RT score ain't going to help in that regard, beyond the categories I already said that I thought it would do well in, the technical categories. But I think Dune probably has an edge there anyway. But this is bad. Giving this low RT score 2 weeks to marinate in the minds of audiences before it even hits theaters is pretty bad. This is the kind of RT score you want to hit right before the movie opens, so that it's too late. People have already bought their tickets and made their plans. 2 weeks gives people time to adjust, make new plans, cancel plans, we'll see what happens. But it's not good. It's rare to see this happen to Disney, but I don't know if Chloe Zhao is the director for that studio. Anyway, speaking of news that you don't want to hear, I've been very vocal in both of my Dune review and spoiler review about the white savior aspects of the movie, which many of you feel is a non-issue. Well. Here we have the audience breakdown. It's 55% Caucasian. That is unheard of for a big blockbuster movie. It's usually in the 40 percentile, usually low 40s. So at 55, that shows a real lack of appeal to audiences of color. The black demographic is way too low for this movie. That's really bad. Black audiences are huge when it comes to the film industry, and so clearly they did not feel like this was a movie for them. I'm sure some of you will be like, feel like you have a different story, but as we've discussed before, the movie business is a volume business, so you have to look at the overall patterns. And then also 70% male, that's also not good. Dune had the strongest appeal on the coasts, New York and LA mostly, with New York City's 68th Street its best location. I told you, the IMAX screen there is the screen to see it on. There's only one theater in the entire world that I think does that movie justice, and that's it. But that not a single Texas or Florida theater got into the top 10 shows the lack of appeal with Middle America as well. Now, of course, we don't know who decided to watch Dune at home, so you have to take that into account. And I don't think they can find out demographics the way they do for people who go to theaters. I know as many of you are like, nobody asked me what my demographic or age group was when I went to see the movie. That's because they do spot polling. And I know that spot polling isn't always the most accurate, but that's the information that we have to go off of. And it's proven to be accurate, at least in the movie business, for as long as they've been doing it, which is why they continue to do it. So while Dune had a strong debut, it's clearly leaving money on the table as Denis Villeneuve did not make a movie with broad appeal. It should have done better with audiences of color, and it should have done better in Middle America, at least based on its theatrical information. So and some of you might be like, who cares? Denis Villeneuve made the movie that he wanted to, and the movie that I wanted him to make. Well, again, this is a volume business, particularly when it comes to blockbusters. They spent $165 million to make Dune, not including advertising. It has to cast a wide net. But there's still lots of good news for Dune. If Dune were a perfect situation, those problems wouldn't have been part of our discussion. But anyway, it is the biggest opening yet for a Warner Brothers HBO Max day-and-date release. A very good sign for The Matrix 4. And it has very solid audience scores, which bode well for its long-term prospects. I'm excited to see speculation as to how it's doing on HBO Max this coming week from third-party sites, and maybe we'll even get an actual announcement from Warner Brothers themselves as to how it's doing on HBO Max. And by the way, speaking of announcements, I hear Warner Brothers is likely to make Dune 2 official sometime this week. Sure enough, to try and boost ticket sales for its second weekend. And before Eternals hits, it has one gimme before it has to go head-to-head with Eternals. Although that might not be such a big problem anymore. Although, when Eternals opens, Dune will lose most of its premium screens, and that's, of course, the way to see it if you're not going to watch it on HBO Max. Worldwide, Dune is up to 221 million with only a moderate 21.9 from China. Let's see how No Time to Die does in the Middle Kingdom when it opens there this coming weekend. But overall, though, Daniel Craig's last Bond, what do you know, is doing very well worldwide. It's up to 525.4 before even hitting China. That's number 5 for the year to date. Once again, Bond's bread and butter is the overseas box office. I think the Broccoli's are going to work very hard to see how they can get the franchise to be a little bit more appealing in the United States. I'm telling you, Josh O'Connor as the new Bond and increase the role of Felix, the CIA operative, traditionally a black character, and I think that 1-2 punch would be huge. That would do it. But No Time to Die is getting close to that point where with PVOD and streaming, where I think it will do boffo business when it hits those two markets, I think it will be considered a big success, and then it was worth the wait to make sure it had a theaters-only release. So good for you, Barbara Broccoli. You didn't blink, and it turned out to be the right decision. As to the rest of the top 10, there's some other good news this weekend. Ron's Gone Wrong has incredible audience scores. Wow, and a very solid opening for a movie with pretty much no advertising or audience awareness. We'll see where that eventually ends up. It's an old Fox holdover, so it's probably not going to go to Disney Plus for quite some time, but that could do very well on PVOD when it hits that. And The French Dispatch is proving this weekend that for the right indie movie, or indie-style movie, because this, of course, is actually a studio film, Fox Searchlight, or not Fox Searchlight, Searchlight Studios, now owned by Disney, but art house audiences will turn out. They tend to be an older crowd, and so we've not had any success during the pandemic with that group. But they showed up here with a stunning 25,000 per theater average. That's huge. That's incredible. And this is the weekend before the movie goes wide. It's Wes Anderson's latest. But last week's new movies fell pretty hard. Here's where the good news stops. 71% drop for Halloween Kills, although that could surge this coming weekend for the holiday itself, and then 56% for The Last Duel. Over on streaming for the week of September 20th with Nielsen, sure enough, there's Squid Game debuting at number 1, double the watch time of second place. Midnight Mass and Ted Lasso also both debuted this week in the middle of the pack. Very cool to see Apple TV in the mix here. Get on here, HBO Max. Get in here. Only Murders in the Building, though, has lost some ground, and it's very surprising after its stronger earlier weeks to see Nine Perfect Strangers finish its run. I looked it up. Its end episode was this week. Outside of the top 10. Woo! It's competitive in original streaming shows, especially because so many come out each week. It's very hard to stay in the top 10. As for movies, Netflix had 3 big hits with new movies that week. Intrusion, yay for Frida Pinto. The Starling, another surprise win for Melissa McCarthy after Thunder Force in April. Wow, 2 shocking surprises. And My Little Pony, going to proving that that's still a very strong brand. Over on Netflix this week, You, Squid Game, and Maid continue to be the Netflix Holy Trinity in the top 3. While season 2 of Lock and Key and brand new animated shows, Inside Job and Maya and the 3, debuted right behind them. It's worth noting that in the entire top 10 for Netflix this week, there's only one movie, and that's the Halloween movie of the week, Night Teeth. Netflix is trying to do movies, but they haven't had nearly the success that they've had with shows. It'll be curious to see what they do going forward. I think that Netflix is, where they really, really shine is basically making like 6 to 10 hour movies. I mean, that's how I would describe Squid Game, Midnight Mass. You is more of a show, but I haven't watched Maid yet, but it's on my list to watch. But I think that's where Netflix really shines. Over on iTunes, Free Guy is still king, but with Old and the Protege now available to rent at a lower price point, they've shot back up. Also, Avatar is on sale and jumped into the top 10. As for this coming week, it's Halloween weekend, which has not typically been a big movie-going weekend because people go trick-or-treating, they have parties, family gatherings. Sure, your plans might look a little different because of the year 2 of the pandemic, but they don't usually release big movies for Halloween weekend. But again, Halloween Kills is a holdover, so some people might go back and watch that. And some smaller movies are going to see if they can't entice you to go out to the movies this weekend. We have Last Night in Soho, Edgar Wright's very stylish horror film. And Antlers finally gets released. So we'll see how those do. I'm curious, what are your Halloween plans, and do they involve a movie? And is it a movie in theaters? Please share those plans down below. And there's also My Hero Academia. They have a new movie, which could impress. We've seen some really good stuff with animation from the East in the box office lately. With streaming movies, Netflix has a huge week. Huge! With awards hopeful Passing on Wednesday, and then Army of the Dead spinoff, Army of Thieves, on Friday. And then more shows. What did I tell you? Every week. Tonight, although, some of these aren't binging. Like, for instance, HBO and therefore HBO Max's Sunday night lineup gets even more awesome tonight as Succession is joined by the final season of Insecure kicking off and a new season of Curb Your Enthusiasm. What a lineup of television! Then on Thursday, HBO Max debuts Season 2 of Love Life. Where's the flight attendant Season 2? While Paramount Plus is anyone watching Love Life? But it got renewed. Then, while Paramount Plus has the new animated series Star Trek Prodigy for some people to watch and some people to hate watch and some people just to make fun of. Finally, on Friday, we have the debut of Apple TV's Swagger. This looks promising. This is from the team behind Friday Night Lights, and it switches the focus from football to basketball. Apple TV's getting pretty competitive. I'm impressed. And speaking of football, Netflix has Colin in black and white. And then Amazon has new animated series Fairfax. So that's this week's Movie Math. What have you been watching? What do you plan to watch? And what are your thoughts on the latest news for Eternals, Dune, and No Time to Die? Share them down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.